Hi, and welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday, brought to you by the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning at UWSP. Are your students bored? I had a teacher in high school who used to say that everything is boring to the bored. This expression suggests that boredom isn't always caused by the environment or the task itself, but that it can originate from the internal state or disposition of the person experiencing it. So, a student who's habitually bored may not necessarily be reacting to the content of the class, but to their own mindset, expectations, or motivational state. In other words, boredom is a reflection of a disengaged mind. I can see why this framing of academic boredom is appealing to educators because it removes the responsibility for student boredom from our shoulders and places it squarely on the students. But academic boredom in post-secondary educational environments is a multifaceted phenomenon influenced by individual, instructional, and contextual factors. That's why this week I'd like to discuss academic boredom, why it matters, what influences it, and how you might respond as an instructor. What is academic boredom? Academic boredom is defined as an aversive emotional state characterized by low arousal and dissatisfaction that's directly linked to academic learning, classroom instruction, and studying. Research shows that it's a common problem at all levels of education, across cultures, and across the globe. The chances are that many of your students experience it. Student boredom should matter to instructors and students alike because it's associated with lower academic outcomes, lower motivation to learn, and the use of less effective study strategies. Bored students gravitate to superficial recall and avoid strategies yielding deeper learning and metacognition. Because our goal as instructors should be to facilitate student achievement of learning goals, it's important for us to be aware of our students' boredom, the reasons for it, and what we can do to promote a more engaged learning experience. So, what are some of the causes of academic boredom? First, boredom arises when the difficulty level of academic tasks does not align with the student's skill level. This leads to lack of challenge or over-challenge. Tasks that are perceived as too easy, which are under-challenging, or too difficult, reduce the intrinsic motivation and engagement of students. This problem may be especially pronounced in courses without prerequisites, in which students may vary greatly in their overall preparedness, especially with regard to math or reading skills. It's likely that less prepared students experience difficulty understanding the lectures and the readings because the vocabulary is unfamiliar or the pace is too quick, and trying to simplify could lead the more prepared students to nod off because you're going too slow for them. So, what can you do? A good strategy is to implement adaptive challenge through differentiated instruction and formative feedback. How are you going to do this? Well, you can use diagnostic assessments to gauge student skill levels and adjust difficulty accordingly. You can apply scaffolding to support students through difficult tasks. If you incorporate cognitively activating tasks, those that require analysis, synthesis, or application, you can eliminate a lot of boredom. These can be integrated into class time as group work or discussions, helping to engage students during the lecture. These will benefit the less prepared students by putting them into a scaffolded environment and providing processing time, and they'll help the more advanced students by challenging them to apply their learning to a novel context. Next, consider how students perceive the relevance or value of what they're learning or doing. When students don't see a connection between the material and their goals, interests, or future aspirations, they're more likely to disengage and experience boredom. What can you do? Foster value through relevance building and goal alignment. How can you do this? Begin with the TILT framework to actively engage students in considering the importance of the learning that you're asking of them or the activity. Use utility value interventions. Have students write about how course content relates to their lives or goals. You can connect topics to real-world applications or current events, or offer students choices and assignments to tap into their personal interests. Monotonous instructional practices can precipitate boredom. Repetitive, passive learning environments, such as long lectures with little interaction, contribute significantly to boredom. What can you do? Increase engagement through varied and interactive pedagogies. How can you do this? Well, break it up. Stop lecturing for an hour straight. Try implementing some active learning techniques like peer instruction or problem based learning or case studies. Try varying instructional formats. Intersperse lectures with discussions, videos, or simulations. Try using multimodal teaching to prevent monotony. That means putting in images, diagrams, charts, maps, videos into your presentation so that you have variation within the course of a lecture. You can include images, diagrams, charts, videos, and contrast this with text-based materials like handouts or essays, different articles or written exercises. Then there are always hands-on activities that you could incorporate into your course where students model something or do some kind of role-playing. Student perception of low autonomy and control over their educational experience can also lead to boredom. Lecture environments tend to be controlled 100% by the instructor. This means that students have little control over their learning because you're controlling the pace, content, and format. When students have low autonomy, they're more likely to disengage emotionally and cognitively. A lack of autonomy undermines their intrinsic motivation. What can you do? Promote autonomy supportive teaching. How can you do this? Well, begin by offering students some choices in topics, formats, or pacing of assignments whenever you can. Encourage goal setting and self-monitoring practices. And frame tasks in a way that emphasizes a student's personal agency and growth associated with that task. Technology distractions and multitasking can amplify boredom by diminishing focus. This leads to spotty understanding, fragmented attention, and lower emotional investment in the learning process. We've all seen the students who can't go a minute without checking their phones. What can you do? Well, foster mindful use of technology and manage distractions. How can you do this? Begin by establishing technology policies or digital etiquette expectations collaboratively with your students. Remember that most folks in Gen Z don't see phone checking as rude, so without discussion of it and its effects, they might think nothing of splitting their attention between their phones and your class. The collaboration in setting the policy gives students autonomy and some ownership over the rules being applied. You aren't telling them how they have to behave, they're telling themselves how they have to behave. Not all use of technology is equal. Don't use it just to use it, but use it intentionally and meaningfully. Polling tools, simulations, and collaborative Canvas tools can add to the emotional investment in the course, but try not to use too many different technologies, especially those with a learning curve. Remember, sometimes low tech is better. Try discussing the cognitive cost of multitasking as part of instruction on different learning strategies. There's a reason that we don't text while driving. You can drive or you can text, but if you do them at the same time, both suffer. The more you can get students to connect the dots on their own rather than just telling them all this, the more buy-in they'll have. Sometimes there are institutional and environmental factors that contribute to academic boredom. Large class sizes, impersonal lecture halls, and limited opportunities for meaningful social interactions can contribute to a sense of detachment and therefore boredom among our students. What can you do? Well, create a positive classroom climate with a sense of community, belonging, and support. How can you do this? Use small group activities to build peer connections, even in large classes. It's often best to use the same groups repeatedly because that reduces group establishment costs and allows greater familiarity over time. You can foster more instructor immediacy. Behaviors that convey warmth, openness, and engagement with students and concerns for their success are very important. Things like learning names and giving personal feedback. You can also encourage student input into class norms and processes to increase their ownership. Finally, in deference to my social studies teacher, Mr. Theros, there really are dispositional and personality factors that affect boredom. Certain students are more prone to boredom due to personality traits such as low conscientiousness, high need for novelty, or boredom proneness as a stable disposition. What can you do? Well, obviously, this is harder to address than many of the other causes of boredom in class, but you can try to support self regulation and curiosity building. How can you do that? Try teaching metacognitive strategies to your students that help them to plan, monitor, and reflect upon their learning. This can help students manage attention and focus. Try encouraging curiosity by posing open ended questions and novelty infused content. Offer mindfulness training to help students notice and manage their emotional state. Finally, address all of the other causes of boredom that we've discussed. When you make your course more engaging, it will probably help students who are disposed to boredom the most. The literature emphasizes that boredom is malleable and responsive to targeted instructional, motivational, and emotional strategies. A multi-pronged approach attending to task design, teaching practices, student mindset, and the classroom climate offers the most effective path toward mitigating boredom and improving student engagement in higher education. And that's this week's teaching tip, brought to you by the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning here at UWSP. Remember, at CITL, we offer support for course design, learning activities, assessment, and pedagogy. Visit our website to schedule a consultation today.